one of the companies that we're in has a lot of low self-monitors. They're probably 70% low, 30% high. And as you've said before, of that 30% high, a disproportionate number is in the higher ranks. But how you get a lot of one kind or another is often a hiring bias.
Well, it's also cultural. So
Could be.
If the organization
values straight talk,
which we've had a fire department like that.
Yeah, I remember.
Mm-hmm. And where they were definitely...
They were also argumentative.
Yes, but they were also definitely low self-monitors too.
For sure.
So we had a fire department like that.
And they were very good.
But you can also have a culture where like self-monitoring doesn't go over so well in like a very peer-based team environment because, the self-monitor is distinguishing themselves.
The high self-monitor.
The high self-monitor is distinguishing themselves from the group that they're supposed to be equal to, and to the extent that, the organization...
And how does a high self-monitor distinguish themselves in a group?
There's a lot of status that's conferred with the high self-monitoring, right? There's a status that happens with being the center. Now, if it's just the center of the group, maybe the group is happy about that, but like you're getting distinguished by crossing boundaries and you're not as much a member of the group. You're going to wind up standing out.
Yeah. One of the things that distinguishes you is you're not just a part of the small group, you're also connected outside of the group into other organizations.
Yeah, and depending on the organization and how much emphasis they have sort of at like this non-hierarchical group setting.
Yeah.
That the high self-monitor is not going to be as likely to rise.
Yeah. I find the assessment itself to be very informative whenever we've done it in groups, because people kind of immediately get that they have a leaning one way or the other. And then it starts explaining communication struggles in many cases. Mm-hmm. Like as an example, that organization that we were in that had so many low self-monitors, it's a healthcare organization. And so as soon as we had that measure, people started basically saying, look, I wonder if this explains why we often have patient complaints that we were rude. Because, people are very sensitive about their health. And if you're a low self-monitor...
It's a vulnerable time.
Yeah. If you're a low self-monitor, again, you're not trying to be mean, but you may say something, like you may actually answer a question. Why somebody is upset that they've been waiting in the ER, and they ask the registration clerk, who's, let's say, a low self-monitor.
Yes, they may get more of an answer that's true.
Yeah. Why am I waiting so
aggravating?
Long? Why am I waiting so long? Well, because your condition isn't a priority right now.
Right.
That is absolutely true, but...
That does not make somebody feel real warm and fuzzy towards you.
Right. Yeah. And so it's an example of the reflexive instinct to answer a question. Like, I have the answer, I'm answering it. That's what it takes a low self-monitor a little bit of time to learn to undo that.
Well, and especially if they're a low self-monitor that doesn't read social cues very well, because, to some degree, if I'm answering something, I would consider generally the truth to be the respectful answer. And
spoken like a true low self-monitor.
Yeah, I know. I don't see my answer as a problem.
Right.
Internally. And if I'm not reading social cues, I'll never learn that maybe sometimes it is.
Yeah. As with any personality variable that we may talk about, or any assessment that's measuring a personality variable, just because you tend to be lower or higher, it doesn't prevent you from doing anything you want with your life. We had a leader at a kind of a junior level who was very low self-monitor rise to a very senior position. And we coached this person and told him all along the way, like, you haven't yet had big consequences for speaking your mind. And so you've been able to go with the grain. But this next promotion, you're now in the orbit of basically your bosses are all politicians. And there's a lot of politicians who are high self-monitors, and they're not going to take kindly to always getting the unfiltered answer. And, sure enough, he's had to work very hard to restrain the behaviors that work very well until they didn't. And I'll use myself. It's not just lows that have to do that. Highs have to do that as well. I mean, I had many, many years of basically using my communication to make people feel good and to largely tell people what they wanted to hear in the situation. And then I look up one day and we have a company where we're doing executive coaching. And if you can't tell people what they need to hear in coaching, you're a terrible coach. You're not a coach, you're a cheerleader. Those are completely different roles. Mm-hmm. I basically realized I'm going to have to increasingly use this less natural skill. And I'm going to have to tell people what they need to hear after a lifetime of going with the grain. Again, we say a version of this probably every fourth or fifth podcast. The higher you go as a manager, the more you have to be good at more and more things. And I don't find this conversation to deviate from that. If you're a brand new manager or you're early in the start of your career, you may be in a place surrounded by other low self-monitors and everybody speaks their mind, and it's not a detriment to you today, but you will not always be in this job with these coworkers.
Well, and the more that it winds up shifting you to, as you get higher, the more you shift into the boundary spanning jobs.
Yep.
The more you're going to have to shift out of the low self-monitoring.
And you'll need more of that.
And the more people you are managing, you're going to have to shift back and forth continuously.
Right, because you have to also be able to tell people, no, and not this, that. That's not a good idea. We're going to do this instead. I'm the shot caller. I'm calling the shot. That is a low self-monitor kind of behavior that high self-monitors are going to have to use increasingly as they rise in organization, just as the opposite is also true for the behaviors.